"We didn't order for your daughter," my mom said, sliding her an empty plate while my sister's kids ate $120, lobster, and cake. Dad laughed. "You know how tight money is. You should have brought snacks." I just smiled. When the waiter returned, I stood up and announced this. I could barely control myself when she said it. I sat there staring at the empty plate she pushed in front of my daughter, trying not to let my hands shake. "We didn't order for your daughter." I felt something crack in my chest, not because I was surprised. Deep down, I knew my mom was capable of being cruel. But because my daughter was sitting right there looking confused, still holding the birthday card she made with glitter and little stickers of cupcakes. She had been excited all day, kept asking if Grandma was going to love her card. She even wore the yellow dress my mom once said she looked cute in. Now she had an empty plate and a front row seat to the way my family really worked. My sister's kids were already halfway through their lobster tails, licking butter off their fingers. Chocolate cake sat waiting for them on the side like this was some kind of private feast. My daughter had a glass of water and nothing else, and I was supposed to just sit there, smile, and not make a scene. My mom acted like this was all normal, like it made perfect sense that my child wasn't included in the dinner. She smiled and kept talking about how beautiful the restaurant was this year. My sister joined in saying something about the white wine being her favorite. No one looked at my daughter, not once. I reminded them I thought I was paying for the dinner. That was the plan. I had agreed a month ago, before everything in my life collapsed, before my husband locked us out, before I had to move back into my childhood bedroom with my 6-year-old, pregnant and broke, trying to find any kind of stability while pretending I wasn't completely falling apart. They knew all of that. But my dad just laughed and said, "You know how tight money is. You should have brought snacks." That's when I smiled because I wasn't going to cry. Not in front of them. The waiter came back to check on drinks, asked if we were ready to order anything else. My mom started to speak, probably to order another bottle of wine. But I stood up. I said, "My mother will be covering the bill tonight, everything on it." The waiter paused, then nodded and walked away like it wasn't the beginning of a war. My dad made some joke about me losing my mind. My mom's voice shot across the table, demanding to know what I thought I was doing. My sister froze mid-bite like she'd never seen anyone talk back before. No one even noticed when I took my daughter's hand and walked out. She didn't ask why we were leaving. She just looked at me and said she wasn't that hungry anyway. I knew she was lying, but we left. And the worst part, we were supposed to go back to their house. That was still called home. They came back a little before 9 Honunkwak. I heard the car doors slam loud and fast like they were still riding the high of being the center of attention. My daughter was already asleep, curled in a little ball on the bed we shared. She hadn't eaten anything, just said she wasn't hungry, and pulled the blanket over her head. I sat on the edge of the mattress for a while, just listening to her breathe. Then I got up, turned off the light, and went to the living room. I didn't turn on any lights, I just sat there waiting. The front door opened like a warning shot. My mom came in first, already mid-sentence, talking loud like she wanted the neighbors to hear how outraged she was. I heard my name twice before she even got her shoes off. My sister followed, laughing like it was all just some insane story they were telling at someone else's expense. Her husband didn't say anything. "You never really did." Then my mom saw me sitting there and started in full force. She said I humiliated her, that what I did was disrespectful, and that it was her birthday, not some day for my little stunts. She said she should have known better than to trust me with anything. My sister added that I made them look like fools, that the waiter kept checking on them after I left, like they were going to bolt on the check. I told them I wasn't going to apologize, that they should be embarrassed, not because of what I did, but because they fed 3 kids lobster while a 6-year-old sat there with an empty plate. My daughter, my mom's tone shifted, then got cold. She said if I didn't like how things were done in her house, I could leave. I reminded her that I didn't have a choice, that we were staying there because I didn't have anywhere else to go. He shrugged. "Not our problem, Patricia." Then she turned and looked at my dad, said she needs to be out by tomorrow. He shook his head, said something about how this had gone too far, but my sister jumped in and backed our mom up, said her kids were starting to feel the stress and that maybe I should get some space to cool off. I laughed, not because it was funny, just because I had nothing left to say. I walked back to the room, packed a small bag quietly, and whispered to my daughter that we were going to Grandma Joe's house. She sat up right away and asked if we could bring her giraffe. That was all she wanted, just her giraffe. We left through the side door. I didn't call Grandma Joe until we were in the car. I didn't want her to hear me cry. She picked up on the second ring. I didn't have to explain much, just said we needed a place for the night. She told me to come over and that the guest bed was already made. She sounded calm, like she'd been expecting the call. When we got there, she was waiting at the door in silk pajamas, holding a glass of red wine and wearing those fuzzy slippers. She only breaks out when she's annoyed about something. She took one look at me, then my daughter stepped aside and said, "All right, tell me everything." So I did. I told her everything from the dinner, the plate, the empty seat, the walkout, the fight at the house. She didn't say anything until I was done, just nodded once, then handed me a blanket and said to get some rest. I thought that would be the end of it, but it wasn't, not even close. I woke up before my daughter did. She was curled up next to me in Grandma Joe's guest room, still holding her giraffe. The blanket had fallen halfway to the floor, and her little feet were sticking out. She looked peaceful, too peaceful, considering the night before. I let her sleep. I went to the kitchen and found Joe already there making coffee in that old stained pot she refuses to replace. Her little white dog was curled on a cushion by the back door, half asleep. She didn't say good morning. She just slid a mug across the table and sat down across from me with her phone. I was still half dazed, trying to piece everything together, still unsure if we were really safe or just floating between disasters. I hadn't even thought about what would happen next. I just knew I wasn't going back. Then Joe broke the silence. "So they served lobster to 3 kids and handed your daughter an empty plate." I nodded. "And you were supposed to pay for the dinner?" I nodded again. He just stared at me, not judging, not even angry yet, just piecing it all together. Then she said very quietly, "And you've been living there under their roof with a child and another one on the way, and they threw you out." I didn't know what to say. I kept looking down at the coffee like I could disappear into it. Joe leaned back in her chair and said, "You know what, Patricia? That's not going to fly with me." I started to say something, probably to defend my mom out of old habit, but she held up a hand. "No more excuses," she said. "You should have called me the second you moved in with them." I told her I didn't want to make a mess, that I thought things would get better, that I was just trying to keep my head down and not cause drama. She just gave a small laugh and said, "Well, now it's my turn." I didn't understand what she meant at the time. She started making calls that morning. I didn't know who she was talking to. Lawyers, maybe her accountant, some guy named Charles, who's apparently her estate manager. But she kept pacing the hallway with a notepad, scribbling things down, asking for numbers, requesting documents. She didn't say anything about it to me. She just made spaghetti that night, poured my daughter a glass of sparkling apple juice in a wine glass, and told us we could sleep there for as long as we needed. She even brought out one of her old silk robes and told me to wear it because she was officially tired of seeing me in that sad Target hoodie. I laughed for the first time in what felt like weeks. The next day, my mom called twice, then my sister. I didn't answer either. Joe did. I was sitting on the couch with my daughter watching cartoons when she picked up the phone in the hallway. I couldn't hear much, just her voice, sharp and clear, not raised, just steady. "No, Patricia's not coming back. No, she won't be staying in your house again." Then a pause. Joe looked right at me through the archway and said, "You might want to check the driveway." When she hung up, I asked what that meant. She poured herself a drink and said flatly, "I had the car towed this morning, the one I bought her. Title's in my name." I blinked. She took a sip and said, "I've been too generous with people who clearly don't deserve it. That ends now." That afternoon, she called the bank, then the property manager, then someone at her investment firm. I didn't ask too many questions. I didn't have to. All I knew was that a storm had started, but for once, I wasn't in the middle of it. I was watching it from safety. By the weekend, everything started falling apart, but not for me. Started with a text from my dad. It came through late Friday night. A weird apology that felt more like a warning. Something about things getting complicated and how he never wanted it to come to this. I didn't reply. Joe read it over my shoulder and said he's only sorry because he knows what's coming. The next morning, my sister showed up at Joe's door. I was in the kitchen making pancakes with my daughter when we heard the doorbell. Joe answered. No greetings, no hugs, just my sister standing there in oversized sunglasses and a hoodie like she was hiding from paparazzi, even though it was barely 9:00 a.m. She asked to come in. Joe didn't budge. She said, "You've got 3 minutes. Use them wisely." My sister started rambling. She said she didn't know Mom was going to kick us out, that she was just trying to calm things down, that her husband was furious now that Grandma had stopped helping them with rent, that they couldn't cover it alone and the landlord was already asking questions. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. "You could fix this if you wanted to. Just tell Grandma you overreacted." I stepped into the hallway so she could see me. I didn't say anything. I just looked at her. She said, "Seriously, Patricia, you're pregnant. You're emotional. She'll believe you. Just say you misunderstood." Mom said she'd take you back if Joe cut her off. No, she won't. She won't take her back, and she won't lie to protect people who left a 6-year-old with an empty plate while their own kids licked frosting off a second dessert. Then she shut the door. 2 hours later, Joe got a call from her lawyer. She had officially pulled out of the mortgage deal she was paying on for my parents' house. Said she was done subsidizing people who thought basic decency was optional. But that wasn't the twist. The twist came on Sunday morning when Joe's neighbor, some guy named Phil, who's known her for years, knocked on the door with a stack of mail that had been delivered to the wrong address. Joe flipped through it casually, then paused. She held up one envelope and looked at me. It was addressed to my mom from a storage facility. Overdue notice, and it was for a second unit my mother had rented secretly. Joe raised an eyebrow. We opened it. Inside was a full list of contents. Most of it looked like standard junk. Furniture, old appliances, boxes of books. But there was one entry that caught her eye. Jewelry case, medium contents, assorted inherited pieces, estate items. Joe went completely still. Then she turned and walked to her office. 10 minutes later, she came back with a photograph. It was a velvet necklace box. Inside it was a gold locket with initials engraved in the back. Joe held it up. "That locket was supposed to go to me when your grandfather died. I just sat there. She never gave it to me. She told me it had been lost." Joe picked up the phone, not to call my mother, to call the police. I didn't expect it to go that far, but Joe did, because for her it was no longer just about dinner. It was about the years of lies that had finally stacked too high to ignore. When the police knocked, it was early, just after 8. My daughter was still in pajamas, watching cartoons with a bowl of dry cereal, her giraffe tucked under one arm. Joe opened the door like she'd been expecting them. No drama, no panic, just polite nods, a few signatures, and a conversation in low tones at the dining table while I stood there, still holding my coffee like I was waiting to wake up from a dream. They weren't there long, 15 minutes maybe. They left with a printed inventory of the storage unit and a copy of the Will Joe had pulled out from a binder labeled Family Nonsense. I remember watching her flip straight to the page with the locket and underline the section like she'd rehearsed it. By lunch, the storage facility had called. Joe answered on speaker. The manager said the unit was locked under police order and that several items inside appeared to match those listed in Joe's original inheritance, including a locket, a diamond tennis bracelet, 2 heirloom rings, and a crystal decanter that Joe thought had been donated years ago. I didn't speak. I just looked at Joe. She didn't look victorious. She looked tired. She hung up the phone, stood up, and said she was going to her room to lie down. That was all. Later that night, I checked my phone and saw 3 missed calls from my dad and 2 from my sister. No voicemails, just calls stacked on top of each other, like they were hoping I'd break down and answer eventually. I didn't. Then just after midnight, another call, this time from my dad. I answered, not because I wanted to hear what he had to say, but because I didn't want him showing up at Joe's door. He sounded worn down, like someone who hadn't slept in days. He said, "You need to talk to your grandmother. She's going too far." I asked him what that meant. He said the bank had frozen a joint account Joe had access to, that she'd pulled her name from the property title of the house he and my mom were living in, something I didn't even know she had a stake in. He said Mom was panicking, that she was threatening to sue Joe, to sue me, to drag everything into court. Then he said something I didn't expect. "Your mom told me the only reason she let you move in was because she thought Joe would keep sending money. She never wanted you there, Patricia. She was trying to look good in front of your grandmother." I sat on the floor after that call staring at the ceiling, wondering how many other things I believed were lies. That week, Joe handed me a check, $10,000. I told her no. She said I wasn't taking it as a favor. She said it was because I needed a clean slate and she wasn't going to sit back while everyone else buried me alive. I took half. That was all I could accept without feeling sick. We found a 2-bedroom apartment 3 towns over. Nothing fancy, but clean, safe, with sunlight in the mornings and a washer-dryer in the unit. Joe called the landlord, and suddenly the security deposit was no longer an issue. I didn't ask how. We moved in quietly on a Sunday morning. No big goodbye, just packed a few suitcases, my daughter's stuffed animals, and left Joe's house with a casserole dish she insisted we take. Even though I told her I had nothing to cook yet. A week after we settled in, I got a call from a woman named Meredith. She said she worked for Joe's estate attorney and that there had been some updates. She wanted to confirm my address. I asked what it was about. She paused, then said, "Joe updated her will." "You've been named as the sole heir and executor." I thought I'd misheard. "I'm sorry," I said. "There must be a mistake." She read Joe's exact words. "Patricia is the only one in this family who never used me. She never asked for more than a place to land. She never stole from me, never manipulated me, never expected me to clean up after her mistakes. She is the one I trust." I sat there for a long time after that. I don't think it was about the money or the inheritance or even the revenge. I think it was the first time in years that someone really saw me, that someone chose me. Not out of guilt, not out of convenience, but because I'd survived and I hadn't let them turn me into one of them. And now, for the first time, I could finally imagine a future, a real one. It's been 4 months since everything cracked open, since the dinner, since the empty plate, since my mom told me to get out like I was a burden she was finally brave enough to shed. We live in a quiet building now. 2nd floor, no elevator, but I don't mind the stairs. The baby's due in 3 weeks. And some days, even walking from the couch to the kitchen feels like running a marathon. But still, I get up. I take my daughter to school. I fold laundry. I make dinner that doesn't come from a box. And I don't have to look over my shoulder or watch my words or brace myself every time my phone rings. I still don't know what to call what happened. It wasn't revenge. Not really. It was more like clarity. Everything that had been twisted and hidden for years finally got dragged into the light. And for once, I didn't turn away from it. My daughter is thriving. She's got glitter paint under her fingernails every day, and she's memorized the names of every dog in the building. She's got a best friend named Riley, who brings sidewalk chalk and tells me I'm the cool mom because I let them use the bathroom sink to wash their muddy shoes. There's always laughter here now, always crayons on the floor. Always some new drawing taped to the fridge with misspelled words and too many hearts. Joe still visits every Thursday. She knocks once and walks in like she owns the place, which in her way, she kind of does. She brings groceries, new books for my daughter, sometimes an extra bag with random things she says she found at the market that I might need later. Last week it was a lavender baby blanket. The week before, a blender. She gives me $5,000 a month. I told her I couldn't take it, that I wouldn't feel right. She said, "You're not taking it. I'm giving it. There's a difference." So I take half. I put the rest into a savings account I haven't touched. I told myself I'd only dip into it when I knew what came next. Not just for the baby, but for me, for both of us. I haven't spoken to my mom since the night Joe made that call. My sister tried once, sent a text saying she hoped I was happy now that the family was falling apart. I never replied. I didn't have the energy or the interest, but I've heard things. The house is in pre-foreclosure. Quiet listing. Word got around in the neighborhood. One of Joe's friends mentioned seeing a "for sale" sign that disappeared after a day. My dad's car was repossessed 2 weeks ago. My sister's back with her in-laws, crowded into 2 bedrooms with 3 kids, no space, no help, and a husband who's now working nights. I don't celebrate it. I'm not keeping score, but I also don't feel sorry because none of this had to happen. All they had to do was act like family. Joe says the thing that shocked her the most wasn't what they did to me. It was how normal they made it seem, like serving my daughter an empty plate was just another Tuesday. I asked her once why she never got involved sooner, why she never asked questions. She looked at me and said, "Because you were always so quiet about it. And I thought if you weren't saying anything, maybe it wasn't that bad." Then she said something I'll never forget. "But I see now, you weren't quiet because it didn't hurt. You were quiet because you didn't think anyone would listen." Now I listen. Every time. When the baby comes, Joe's already said she's moving into the guest room for a few weeks. Says she's not going to miss the moment she becomes a great-grandmother. Says she wants to be the one to teach my daughter how to swaddle a baby. The locket is still in her bedroom. She keeps it on the windowsill in a velvet box next to a little framed photo of her and my grandfather. I walked in once and saw her holding it, just sitting in the morning sun, not saying anything. I told her she could give it to me any time. She smiled and said, "No, I'll give it to you when I see you wear your own name with pride." I think I understand that now, because for the first time, I'm not asking for space. I'm taking it. And for the first time, I'm not surviving someone else's chaos. I'm building something of my own, from the ground up, quietly, steadily. There are still moments when the past creeps back in, when my phone rings with an unknown number, or I see a car that looks like my dad's, and my stomach drops before I remember we're free now. My daughter sometimes asks if Grandma and Grandpa will visit. I tell her maybe someday, but only if they learn how to be kind. She nods like she understands more than she should. The baby kicks hard sometimes, like she's reminding me we're not done yet, that this story isn't over, that new beginnings can grow from the ashes of old ones. At night, I write lists of everything I want to teach both my girls. Things no one taught me. How to love without losing yourself. How to stand up even when your voice shakes. How to walk away when staying costs too much. How to know the difference between being strong and being numb. Joe says I'm stubborn like she was at my age. She tells me stories about how everyone doubted her when she started her business, how she signed her first lease on a building when people said she'd never last a year. They forget I'm still here, she laughs, and I'm not done yet either. Sometimes I wonder if this is what healing looks like. Just two women, generations apart, drinking coffee and letting the quiet mean peace instead of punishment. My daughter helps Joe in the garden on Thursdays. She wears oversized gloves and calls herself the flower boss. They argue over whether daisies or tulips are better, and Joe always lets her win. The laughter from the backyard drifts through the open window while I wash dishes, and for once, the sound doesn't make me tense. It makes me grateful. It makes me breathe deeper. Last week, we finally hung curtains in the living room. I used the money Joe insisted on giving me, even though I swore I wouldn't. She said, "It's not charity, it's investment." And the curtains are yellow, my daughter's favorite color, the same shade as the dress she wore that night at the restaurant. The one that used to remind me of humiliation now feels like sunlight pouring in. I think that's what time and love do. They take what was meant to break you and turn it into something that holds you instead. The first night we put them up, I couldn't stop staring at how soft the light looked across the floor. My daughter was coloring on the couch, humming to herself, her belly poking out of her pajamas. I thought about all the nights I sat in that old house trying to keep her quiet so we wouldn't be scolded for making too much noise. Now I tell her to laugh louder. I tell her this is her home, and she can fill it with all the noise she wants. Joe brought over baby clothes yesterday, tiny onesies and blankets that smell like lavender. She said she'd already stocked the freezer with meals for after I deliver. "No arguments," she warned. "You'll need to eat like a queen." I smiled because I finally understood what it feels like to be cared for without conditions, without being reminded of the cost. Sometimes, when I can't sleep, I think about that night at the restaurant, about the empty plate, the laughter, the look on my mother's face when I stood up. For years, I thought standing up meant defiance. Now I know it means freedom. I used to believe that family was something you owed no matter the pain. Now I know that real family doesn't require you to shrink. It doesn't hand a child an empty plate. It doesn't call cruelty tradition and expect you to applaud. The police case never went anywhere dramatic, just quiet paperwork, a few recoveries, a lot of silence. My mom tried to call Joe once, left a long message full of half apologies and justifications. Joe never returned it. She said, "Some bridges are better left burned. They light the way forward." I didn't ask what happened to the jewelry after that. It didn't matter anymore. Joe said she kept what belonged to her and donated the rest. Closure doesn't always need a parade. Sometimes it just needs peace. My sister sent a card after the baby shower Joe threw. No return address. Just a short note that said, "I miss how we used to be." I stared at it for a long time, then put it in a drawer. Because the truth is, we were never how she remembered. We were what our parents shaped us to be. Quiet, divided, pretending everything was fine. I don't want that used to be back. I want what's next. What's next is simple. It's my daughter's laughter echoing through a home that smells like coffee and clean laundry. It's Joe humming old songs while she rocks the baby I haven't met yet. It's sunlight catching the yellow curtains every morning. It's knowing that no one in this house has to earn their place at the table, that love here is given freely, not rationed out like a privilege. When I tuck my daughter in at night, she still sleeps with her giraffe. Sometimes she asks if the new baby will have one too. I tell her yes, and she smiles like it's the most important promise in the world. Maybe it is, because for her, love has never been something to beg for. For her, it's just there, warm, steady, enough. I used to think healing would feel like a finish line. Now I see it's a rhythm. Some days strong, some days soft, but always forward, always learning to hold myself the way I hold my children, gently, with patience. Jo says one day she'll give me the locket. I think when she does, I'll wear it not as a memory, but as proof that the cycle ended here. That this family, the one I chose to build, will never know the taste of shame disguised as love. Sometimes I catch my reflection and barely recognize myself, not because I look different, but because I finally look whole. The woman who once sat at a table full of lobster and silence doesn't exist anymore. The one standing here does. She's not perfect, but she's free. And freedom, I've learned, is worth every empty plate that led me here.